Hey guys, it's Neil again from Heart of Texas Armory, and today I want to do a video just kind of discussing some of the reasons why I love vintage watches. So I've got two watches sitting in front of you here, this one on the left being a vintage and this being a new production. They're both Vostok watches, and I have reviews of both of these on my channel. So on the left here, the vintage example, this is going to be a vintage Vostok Amphibia, the anti-magnetic model. And then here next to it is going to be a new production Vostok Amphibia 710, the Scuba Dude. And I love both of these watches, by the way. They're two of my favorite daily wearers. But let's slide this new production over a little bit so we can focus on this vintage piece, because that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And let me bring it up closer and refocus. 1 second, guys. There we go. So one of my favorite things about vintage watches is just the natural patina that you're going to get. And patina means basically the aging, the character a watch picks up through years or decades of use. So you can see this watch here, it's got a number of scratches and dings on it. The bezel's been kind of beat up. There's scratches all over the case. But all this adds to the character of the watch, and I love that type of stuff. But what I really want to talk about is the color of this dial. So you can notice it kind of has a cream color. Now, when it was first produced, which I'm guessing was probably late 70s, maybe early 80s, this particular watch. So when it was first produced, it probably had a very bright white dial, but through years and over the decades, it's picked up that patina, and you'll notice it kind of has a cream color. So it has a little bit of a yellow tint. You probably will also notice it on the lume section, so the hands and the pips and the embassy markings here. They all also have kind of a yellow look to them when you compare it against a new production watch. Now, I don't know if you can see the difference really on camera, but you can certainly pick it up in person. Just a slightly more yellow look to it. But that's one of my favorite things about vintage watches. I just love the patina. There are new watches that you can buy that try to replicate this, but to me, when you put them side by side with an actual vintage piece, it's easy to spot the replica. It's just very difficult to replicate authentic patina. And that is one of the things I just love about vintage watches. It's just that patina. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are in the same boat as me on that. Now, another thing that I really enjoy about these is in most vintage watches, there are some that are automatic, but most are going to be manual wound watches, meaning you have to manually wind the watch. And that's what this one is here. So when you do that, you kind of, I don't know what it is. It's almost like having building a relationship with the watch. I know that sounds kind of strange, but again, I'm sure some of you guys understand what I'm talking about. But you just get a better feel for the watch when you have to actually wind it every single day or every other day. There's just something about doing that is just very satisfying. Now, another bonus is being manual wound, it's going to be thin. So Vostoks are already kind of thick because they have that domed acrylic crystal. But when you bring in a modern one that has an automatic movement, you can look at the difference here. The new production is going to be considerably thicker because it's got to have room for the automatic rotor here, where the manual wound one does not have the rotor, so the case back does not bulge out like the new production automatics do. So what that translates to is just it's going to wear flatter on the wrist. So some of you guys may not care about that, and you may actually like having the more wrist presence, but I kind of like having the watch is as close to my wrist as possible. To me, it just wears better. So that's another bonus for me. Some of the other things is just the build quality on these. Now, this kind of can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, but with these Vostoks, to me, the older stuff like this here, the actual vintage stuff, say whenever the fall of the Soviet Union was, I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but, stuff that was made in the Soviet Union, 80s, 1970s, 1960s stuff, it just feels like it's built better. A lot of your edges here, your hard edges are going to be smoother, so they're not as rough cut. They have a little more fit and finish to them than the new production. So I just feel that they just feel more solid to me. I don't know if they just spent more time making them. I'm sure that's probably the case because they probably weren't producing quite as many as they are nowadays, but they just seem to be a higher quality. Now, of course, that can vary from model to model and manufacturer to manufacturer, but I'm just speaking directly with this Vostok here. It just feels like a higher quality watch than, say, this new one, which is also a high quality watch. I'm not knocking this watch at all. I'm just saying this feels, to me, like a higher quality watch. Another cool thing is, like on these Vostoks, you'll see you've got the Soviet markings and stuff. So they all have Cyrillic text on them. So even the new production stuff here, it's going to have Cyrillic, but that's going to say made in Russia, where this one is made in the Soviet Union, the USSR. So that's pretty cool too. So hopefully some of you guys will enjoy this video. If you've got any vintage watches that you really enjoy or Vostok watches you really enjoy, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear about them. If you've had any stories you want to share about, your vintage watches, again, I'd love to hear those. But there's just something about a vintage watch. There's a lot of watch snobs out there that, will judge people based on what watch they're wearing. And one thing I've noticed is if you have an actual vintage piece, vintage watch, even if it's from a brand like, Vostok, which, some people just think are junk. But when you wear a vintage piece, even if they have a bad, they don't like Vostoks for whatever reason, they just look down on them. They won't look down on an actual vintage piece. You always get a lot of compliments on vintage pieces. You can impress a lot of watch snobs with a vintage piece like this. So once again, guys, this is Neil at Heart of Texas Armory. I hope you enjoyed looking at this vintage piece here. And like I said, if you got any vintage watches, let me know down below in the comments. I hope you enjoy this. Y'all take care. I'll catch you on the next one.